I rise to discuss the state of the ongoing negotiations to avert the fiscal cliff. So far, there's been little progress reported at the negotiating table. Since the President's very productive meeting with the bipartisan leaders from the House and Senate on November 16th, the subsequent staff talks have produced no breakthroughs. Republicans in the room are not yet acknowledging the need to let tax breaks for the very wealthiest Americans expire, nor are they offering the kind of reasonable reforms to entitlement programs that Democrats can be expected to support. But despite this impasse, as Leader McConnell described it on the floor yesterday, I'm optimistic we can still get a deal by Christmas. I detect a great deal of progress being made beneath the surface. You only need to turn on television these past couple of days to observe the signs of this progress. For nearly 3 decades, a right-wing Washington lobbyist has exerted a stranglehold on mainstream Republicans over the issue of taxes, threatening political retaliation against any lawmaker who dared to vote for any fiscal solution that asked the wealthy to pay their fair share. But in the 3 weeks since the election, one Republican after another has been rebuking this lobbyist for his uncompromising stance on taxes. Republicans in both the House and Senate are deciding they no longer want to be married to this pledge. Republicans are saying they want a divorce from Grover Norquist. That alone is a leading indicator that the fiscal deal is within reach. Both sides are still far apart. The discussions over the next few weeks will be difficult, but with each new Republican disavowing Grover Norquist, the chances of a deal rises sharply. First, there was Saxby Chambliss, an honorable member of this body, a charter member of the Gang of Six, who has spent the last 2 years trying to negotiate a bipartisan compromise in the best of faith. Senator Chambliss is a signer of the Norquist pledge, but he went on TV down in Georgia, not somewhere else, down in Georgia last week, and bravely said, quote, "I care about my country more than I do about a 20-year-old pledge," unquote. Then on ABC this past Sunday, Lindsey Graham said, quote, "The only pledge we should be making is to each other, to avoid becoming Greece." On the very same program, my friend from New York, Congressman Pete King, said the pledge no longer applied because, quote, "the world has changed and the economic situation is different." Now, these were just 2 interviews with George Stephanopoulos, but sometimes progress on the Sunday news shows can foreshadow progress in the negotiating room. In fact, these comments by Senators Chambliss, Graham, and King appear to have started a trend. Yesterday, Senator Corker echoed their sentiments. He released his own fiscal plan, which contains $1 trillion in new revenues. Asked whether his inclusion of revenues puts him at cross purposes with Grover Norquist, Senator Corker said, quote, "I'm not obligated on the pledge. The only thing I'm honoring is the oath I take when I serve, when I'm sworn in January," unquote. Senator Murkowski said similar things yesterday. Even Senator Sessions showed hints of compromise when he said about the pledge, quote, "We've got to deal with the crisis we face. We've got to deal with the political reality of the president's victory," unquote. And then this morning, the vaunted Wall Street Journal editorial page even seemed to distance itself from Mr. Norquist. Of the need to compromise with President Obama, the Journal counseled, quote, "This is where Mr. Norquist can give some ground. If taxes are going up anyway because the Bush rates expire and Republicans can stop them from going as much as they otherwise would, then pledge takers deserve some credit for that." Now, we disagree with the forms of revenues that most of these Republicans have in mind. Many of the Republicans expressing openness to revenues want to pursue them only through tax reform next year, and even then they're only willing to consider limits of deductions as opposed to rate increases on the very wealthy. Democrats, on the other hand, Mr. President, believe that even if Republicans want to kick tax reform into 2013, a significant down payment on revenues must be enacted before January 1st. And we further believe that the fairest, most straightforward way to make that down payment on revenues is by decoupling the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy. Limiting deductions is a necessary raising revenue component of a grand bargain, but it does not and cannot replace the need for restoring the Clinton-era rates for the top two tax brackets. Republicans are not quite there yet in terms of acknowledging this, but they are moving slowly in the right direction. As the Washington Post reported this weekend, for the first time in decades, there is, quote, a bipartisan consensus in favor of asking the wealthy to pay a little more to reduce the deficit. The question is how to do it. This is an encouraging development. It suggests that Republicans are slowly absorbing one of the lessons of the 2012 election, which is elections continue to be won in the middle, and victories remain elusive for any party that caters to special interest groups that occupy either the far left or the far right. Over the years, the Democratic Party has wrestled with the same issues Republicans are facing. When I was elected to Congress in 1981, crime was ripping apart my district. I came to Washington with the goal of working to pass new laws to crack down on crime. Lo and behold, I found that the Democratic Congress at the time was literally outsourcing the drafting of crime legislation to the ACLU. I have great respect for the views of civil libertarians, but at that time the activists' motto was, quote, let 100 guilty people go free, lest you convict one innocent person, unquote. That view was far outside the mainstream, but it dominated our party's thinking on crime for better than a decade. Our party suffered for it. We didn't snap out of it till President Clinton passed the crime bill in the 1990s. After that, we won back the trust of moderate, middle-class voters. So I know the echo chamber some of our Republican colleagues are in, and I know how difficult it is. But if history shows anything, after suffering some bad losses at the polls earlier this month, many Republicans are now realizing the need to snap out of it on taxes. Grover Norquist has had a good run. It's lasted far longer than the 15 minutes, than 15 minutes. But his stringent... Mr. President, could I have a little order here, please? Mr. President.
The Senate will be in order. The Senate will be in order.
Grover Norquist has had a good run. It's lasted far longer than 15 minutes, but his stringent views make him an outlier now. It is not unlike what happened to his longtime friend Ralph Reed, who steered the Republican Party too far right on social issues in the 90s and is hardly heard from anymore. Mr. Norquist will likely not be departing the scene anytime soon, but perhaps he could switch his focus to immigration. He makes a lot of sense on the need for a comprehensive immigration reform bill, and I'd be the first to work with him on that. But as the events of the last week's show on taxes, Grover Norquist is out on an island. I salute my colleagues in conclusion, Mr. President, on the other side of the aisle, who have disavowed his group's pledge. I will encourage others to do the same. The more who do, the closer we will come to a bipartisan agreement on our fiscal problems.